Welcome to Tap into Data. How we doing?
Doing great. We have an exciting
Doing
guest
great.
today, so this is awesome. Instead of just the two of us rambling for an hour trying to get some people to view us, they only watch us when we have a guest on the show.
I know it is kind of sad watching the live streams of how many people watch, or the feed afterwards of how many people watch the ones that were not the main focus. When we have a guest on, we get so much better
Yeah, it
traction.
goes straight up. So Zach,
So,
welcome.
anyways, yeah, welcome, Zach. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Zach Roach. I'm the senior UAS program manager for Excel Energy. Really excited to be here to talk with you guys today. I'm a huge data nerd. You guys will, learn about learn all about that over the course of the next 30 minutes or so. Yeah, I've been the UAS program manager at Excel here for the last year and a half. Prior to that, I was working for the previous program manager at Excel as just a UAS pilot. I got my start in drones as an Air Force combat controller. So for those of you that don't know what that is, a lot of people don't. It's kind of like the Air Force's version of special operations. Combat controllers get attached to Army ODAs, so Special Forces teams, Navy SEAL teams, to be like the air-to-ground liaison for their special operations unit. So typically you're doing a lot of talking on the radio. You're doing CASEVAC, medevac surveys, close air support. But realistically, what you're doing is you're giving the special operations team on the ground access to the Air Force's air power. Like that's your job. Um, so I always tell people, like, if you ever seen the original Transformers, Tyrese Gibson's character in that movie with the red beret,
Yeah,
that's combat control.
okay.
Yeah. A big part of the job that a lot of people don't really know about is like the assault zones, which is setting up dirt landing strips out in the middle of nowhere to land C-17, C-130s. Those require surveys, and surprisingly a lot of data collection. Getting that foundation of surveying, incorporating drones into that. We were flying DJI Phantom 4s, on my deployment in 2016 to Northwest Africa to do a lot of those assessments. That's really how I got started in drones. And then I got my first like commercial job as a contractor working on the PG&E Wildfire Safety Inspection Program in 2018. And that's how I kind of got into the utility side of things with drones. Really excited to be here and share all the cool things that we're doing at Excel Energy.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you touched on PG&E. So when I was had my time with Hydro One, which is the utility here in Ontario, there was a lot of talk with PG&E at that time about wildfire mitigation strategies, controlling vegetation. For myself, I started in the industry in 2003, so a lot of the stuff was boots on the ground, right? We weren't talking about LiDAR, so a lot of it was foot patrol when you do condition surveys, and then you go out and actually execute the work. So what's it like today? Like I know you and Jared do a lot of work together on some of the drone type activity, but yeah, how has it transformed over the last maybe 10 years?
I mean, it surprisingly hasn't changed that much. If
Okay.
you look at, kind of where the PG&E project was and where it started, the biggest thing that's changed, I think, is just the hardware has like dramatically improved, right? And the types of drones that we're using, the sensors that we're using are just incredible compared to back then. When we were flying like Inspire ones with X5s and having it return to home with critically low battery, like 22
Yeah,
minutes, 18 minutes.
And the legs wouldn't go down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
that's great. I'm outdating myself thinking that boots on the ground was still something that was only ten years ago, but down your way, it's definitely a little different than the utilities up here. So for utilities that are listening in the Canadian market, let's get after some drones.
yeah, absolutely.
So what, Zach? I mean, what do you think is like your experience in the Air Force, your experience with some of those jobs? Obviously, some of your experience getting into the commercial drone space with PG&E. How has that shaped what you're doing at XL Energy? How does that shape what your team is doing, and how have you leveraged what you've learned and started to apply that at XL Energy?
Oh, man, yeah, absolutely. My viewpoint on just like data collection, the implementation of technology at the utility is all you know founded in my experience as an Air Force combat controller. I mean, We so much of what you do is data driven. And we have these big kinetic chains of things that need to happen in order to put like a bomb on target or to be able to land a C-17 on a dirt runway in the middle of the night with no markings, right? And so much of that comes from the people who are on the ground, with the sensors, collecting the data, building the products, right? And the things that were taught to me in the Air Force were, we had like these three different levels of thinking, right? Like that strategic level of thinking, that operational level, and that tactical level, right? And that's kind of been like, that's what I always come back to anytime I start thinking of, what we need to do to go collect data to support some type of inspection or, implement some new software application or automation. It's always that perspective of like, what level of thinking are we operating at right here? And that's what kind of creates that situational awareness for you to be able to make data-driven decisions. And I think a really good example of that is just with flight mission management and just like, how we're capturing that, how we're managing that to be able to support like automated drone flights across the enterprise. And, how do we gather all of that sensory data and put it towards, actually being able to generate insights that are going to save the company time, money, reduce risk. Right. And, I think, as we separate those things out into those different levels, we can really, really see like where we need to make changes and, where we can, implement the automation that's really going to force multiply our people at the end of the day.
Yeah. So do you see, I mean, as you look at like the future of the industry, obviously you've been in the industry a long time. Like I've been in the industry a long time. Adam's getting new to the drones, but he's been in the utility space for a long time. Do you see it growing with people, or do you see it growing with that automation, with the hardware, and what kind of hardware is at the forefront of that growth and what you're seeing today? I mean, I know a little bit of that, right? Because obviously we have the opportunity to work on a lot of that project together, but where do you see that going in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's going to kind of take the same road, the same path as, commercial airline. The commercial airline industry is a really great example of like a healthy use of automation and, having a human in the loop, right? Like the autopilots that you have and, the newest 777s, 787s, I mean, they don't really need pilots. I mean, like they're fully autonomous systems for the most part. They can take off and land and, zero visibility, zero RVR. Like that's just how good the technology is now, but we still have two pilots in the cockpit for a reason, right? And it's having that healthy respect for the automation and using the automation to be able to reduce the workload on the pilot or the operator or the engineer or, whatever the persona is that's leveraging the automation to be able to reduce their workload so they can focus on the things that humans do really well, which is, make decisions, focus on safety, gathering insights and intelligence from, the data that's being collected, right? And facilitate those things that maybe the automation isn't so good at right now, so that we can really take a tactical approach to solving some of these really challenging problems at the utility, like wildfire mitigation, reducing the risk of aging infrastructure, et cetera.
Absolutely. No, it's pretty incredible. And I think to your point, like you're never going to replace humans altogether, right? But you can make them focus on the right things, right? You can make their job easier. You can make it more repeatable in the way that you're collecting data, and that's really important. And what we've had the opportunity to see, right? So, like over the last 6 months, and some of this I can answer, but I'm interested to see your perspective. But over the last 6 to 12 months, how has Excel started to move into that automation, kind of more of like system overseer? What have you done as far as aerospace, beyond visual line of sight, one to many, and kind of shifting the type of drones you're putting out into the field as the UAS program manager?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think we're really, pushing the automation is definitely on the inspection side, the assessment side, just across the different asset environments. What a lot of people don't realize about Excel is that our rate base is actually surprisingly smaller. You think of Excel and you're like, oh wow, that's a huge utility company, right? But when you start comparing Excel to like the PG&Es, the Florida Power and Lights, right, the people with like really developed technology programs and UAS programs, our rate bases just aren't even near where theirs are, right? So they have a lot more money to invest. They can take on a lot more risk, right? And so, they also can throw people at problems, right? And whereas we don't really have the luxury of doing that. So, everything, all the decisions that we make on like where we do and make technology investments are, kind of directed at, trying to maximize the performance of our people, right? The people that we already have and enabling them to do more, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from and what we're thinking about when we make these investments in automation. And at least on the drone side, we've found that there's been a lot of success and with internal data collection and being able to run these automated missions and when you run an automated mission, you can divert your focus as an operator across multiple platforms that are flying simultaneously because the drone's doing the majority of the work. So what we've done is we originally started evaluating that in solar, as right? And our goal was to be able to fly one or two of our large solar sites in Minnesota like simultaneously, right? And there's a lot of like operational nuance there with how long we can fly for in order to be able to capture a good data set, right? So we had to get really creative with how we actually go and get that data. And with a 3-hour capture window, you kind of need to be able to maximize the amount of collection that you're going to do, per minute, right? So, with 7 drones, 8 drones between Sherco 1 and 2 up in Minnesota, being able to fly, 7 or 8 at a time was really what drove us to pursue a Beyond Visual on a Site waiver with a one-to-many amendment. And we ended up getting it around last year in June. And, we're still kind of working on getting solar stood up, but we made a lot of really great progress on the distribution side, and we're currently doing, 4-to-1, and that has just been phenomenal. I mean, we've been really turning out inspections, and it's really completely changed our mentality on, where we're going to spend money as far as data collection and, how much of the system we can look at. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we've gained so far with these automated inspections, doing Beyond Visual on a Site is that we can see so much more of the system and so much of a shorter time period that it's really reducing our risk profile for operating our assets. And I think that's probably the biggest value is you're just really, really efficient with your inspection programs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredible, right? So like when Zach talks about solar, we talk about what we've done with XL and solar. We were talking with some of the first 8 sites, we're talking 33 drone in the box units, remotely deployed, enabled with Starlink that allows us to scale that, right? To allows us to visit, see what's going on with all those sites, keep operations in the loop, and have a pilot never needing to go on site, right? They can be somewhere else, controlling those drones, flying multiple of them at the same time, completing those inspections. And I think one of the unique goals of XL is like they want to look at their whole site every month, right? They want to be able to keep up with changes, with what's going on, with warranty cycles, and be the most efficient, in that power generation. And that's where we, kind of aimed with that number of docks, those number of sites. And that's all enabled with the DJI Dock 2, right? So like we'll get into and we'll switch over to kind of the next use case, but the DJI Dock 2 deployed at those solar sites, and we're getting a perspective that's pretty incredible as far as what we can hand back to the operations team. But I think, in the last year, we've had the opportunity with XL to dive into the Dock 3. And the biggest or the unique part about the Dock 3, as we've talked on some of the previous episodes, is you can put a mobile mount in there with the DJI Dock 3 and make it mobile, right? You can put it on the back of a truck. So, I mean, I guess maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you're using the Dock 3, how you're using that mobile capability, and how that's taken kind of operations and inspections to the next level.
Yeah, I think, it kind of starts with the end user, right? And you think about the type of guys that are out in the field maintaining these assets, our frontline employees at Excel, so our reliability engineers, our union linemen, our groundmen, interns, like pretty much anybody who's going to go out in the field and work with the asset that they're inspecting or monitoring, needs to be able to leverage drones as a tool, right? And one of the big, limitations that we've had at Excel has just been our original hub and spoke model that we, established our UAS program under. Its core responsibility was to train skilled pilots at Excel Energy, people that were going to fly drones as like a secondary responsibility rather than their primary full-time job. I think year to date we've trained over like 80 business unit pilots, and that was effective for the time period where that we're talking about, which is probably like the last 3 to 4 years. And what we found is it was actually really really challenging to keep these folks proficient and flying consistently. Most of these business unit pilots will only fly a handful of times a year, right? So like the technology was just being massively underutilized, right? And a lot of that is just because it takes some work and some skill to be able to operate these things in the field and get what you need and consistently produce a data set that you can rely on and build on, right? And so as we evaluated the historical data of our UAS program, we realized that if we could streamline the user experience of these folks in the field and turn them into what the FAA is referring to as flight coordinators rather than skilled pilots, we would actually get a lot more utilization out of the technology. And so that's where we started kicking around this idea of taking a drone in a box that was we have fixed at solar sites, putting them in the back of vehicles and driving them around to do electric distribution inspections, look at the top of the pole, eventually collect LiDAR, do transmission inspections, you name it, right? And so we have initially evaluated the Dock 2 for that, and it just like that thing it's a great platform, right? But like you cannot move that thing around. Like it's designed
Right.
to be in one spot. And so the Dock 3 was kind of just coming out once we learned that. And that thing actually, it seemed like DJI put a lot of thought into their users or their customers being able to take that dock and maneuver it and move it around, right? And with the one tap calibration and some of the other features they added as a part of the new Dock 3 line. And so we went out and we did some testing with it up in Boulder, trying to run some automated flight routines for distribution. And it took us a little bit of time to figure it out, but once we got the targeting right, we were like, wow, like this is going to change the game. It's really going to streamline the end user experience to where this thing's just going to become a tool that you put in the back of your truck. You drive out to the field, you have a job that you're going to do. The drone goes and does that job for the field operator, and then my team as a centralized remote pilot operations center takes on the burden of the safety of flight, and really just relegating that technology down into a tool that anybody at Excel Energy can use. And that's why we're like huge supporters of Part 108. We think that that's definitely the right path for the FAA to be able to help enable this and across the national airspace system. And we're really, really excited to be a part of that and help drive that forward.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's the Dock 3 certainly changed the game, right? Like they took everything they learned from the first Dock, which you guys had a couple of back in the day, the Dock 2 certainly, and made it that much better, right? So a little bit bigger size, but pretty incredible capabilities. So I mean, another part that's been, I think, really important to this whole process is just the ability for us to have, build a pretty good relationship with folks from DJI, with, team on their solutions engineering team, on their dock sales team, and push some changes. I know one of the ones that definitely changed the game for us, and there's plenty more on the list that we have for them, but was the ability to do one-tap calibration with RTK, right? So you talked about one of the first things that we tried to really figure out was how do we position things accurately, right? Because, in some cases, as folks from the utility industry know that are listening to this, or folks who have worked with utilities, distribution poles aren't always where they say they're going to be, right? There's not always a consistency there. But we want to know with certainty that we're targeting the right area. And if there's not a pole there, then we can correct that, right? So we can put tools in place. But I think that RTK calibration was a big piece of that. What other, pieces of information or insights have you been able to gain in those conversations with DJI?
Yeah, I think there's there's a lot of things that they could do to help improve the experience of utilizing those products. I mean, I think I think the actual limitation is C2 and like communications, right? Like especially for BVLOS flying, and you know, I like we operate a ton of critical infrastructure and just transmission distribution infrastructure where sub to sub we're like 35, 36 miles from sub to sub on average, right? Which is a tremendous distance. So like, putting, like a Percepto drone in a box in a substation and automating our patrols is kind of like out of the question, right? It's just too far. So, having that mobile solution really like gives us that flexibility to not have to go buy, 10,000 docks, right? Like we can, buy a reasonable amount of docks and pair them with, our flight coordinators, our linemen to be able to go and facilitate those inspections. But C2 is still a challenge, right? Because, we operate in the Rocky Mountains, and, being able to stay connected to those drones when they pass over the other side of the mountain or in, semi to non-permissive terrain, it's like you have to be able to communicate, right? And that's one of the, I think, the downsides of the DJI products is, with like the cybersecurity concerns and not having an LTE, connectivity part of their dock system, I think is, really holding us back. I think if we can, improve that with a third-party system, like a third-party dongle or something, that would like really, really extend our flight envelope and, how far we could operate away from, the takeoff and launch locations. But, it just depends, right, on like the application. I think, for like a PSPS restoration type of workflow, you're going to want the ability to fly further. But for like a routine inspection for distribution, we're going to want to be able to take more drones, go out to one spot that's centrally located, and just let the drones deploy and go, grab the data, right? So it really just depends on like what you're after. Right equipment, right mission, right? You want to make sure you're matching the aircraft for the mission in a way that's going to be optimal, right? And that's connectivity is a huge thing right now that we're struggling with DJI. But I think there's definitely some things that they can do. I mean, we've been talking about the since we have the one-to-many capability, having like a dual dock system where one of the docks acts as a like a relay, right? So one drone takes off, hovers, goes into relay mode, while the other dock goes and facilitates the inspection, allowing you to expand your flight envelope. So I think there's a lot of things that are in the works that they're doing that's really great. But I think as soon as they get a third-party dongle approved and start using that, so we don't have to use relay stations, I think that's really going to open the door to facilitating a lot of different types of inspections.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think the one time, I mean, obviously we've done a lot of different environments, right? XL operates up here in Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Wisconsin, down in Colorado, and down in Texas. And we have kind of unique. I've been to all of those states for XL. Back in the Wind days, right? I started working with XL and Wind some 10 years ago. Again with an Inspire One Pro and an X5, which was at the time incredible. Looking back, a piece of garbage compared to what we have today at our disposal, right? But that was from the Inspire through the Inspire 2, through the M210, and through the M300 and M350. And I think, that's what it is, seeing XL's program grow from like this introduction to drones back in 2015, 2016, when I started working with XL, to where you've taken it today, is pretty incredible. But I mean, we went from, manually flying a wind turbine to full automation with folks on site flying those, to now, to your point, figuring out challenges of how we put a dock and let it climb almost 3,000 feet is what we're doing in some of those critical wildfire corridors to do inspections of distribution lines. Is pretty incredible. So I mean, as we talk about the inspections of distribution lines, the inspection of some of the transmission infrastructure, what information goes into making those automated missions, right? Like a lot of it, obviously, is we can talk about, and hopefully in a future episode we'll be able to go into plenty of depth into what we all know is fueling some of that. But obviously, what fuels that is accurate information about the assets. How do you go about capturing, accurate transmission component targeting? How do you go about, corrective distribution pole locations? How do you go about collecting the right data to allow that automation to happen?
Yeah, so I think it's, that's a really, really good question. The utility industry in general, not not just us, but I think everybody struggles with that. And we every major utility is operating a ton of different assets across all kinds of different environments. Keeping a level of situational awareness and the cleanliness of a database to be able to rely on that information for targeting components with an automated flight routine is just like your asset records have to be very meticulously kept, right? I mean, you have to have really great data in your system that you can rely on, and that's been something that has been really, really tough for us, and we've had to work through that. I mean, we've done all kinds of different GIS conflation efforts where we're correcting asset locations from satellite imagery. We're taking parcel map data to be able to shift the land layer to match up with the assets. And we use Small World right now as like our GIS system of record. We're, I think, in the process of moving to like an Esri based system in ArcGIS Enterprise, but so working with Small World is incredibly difficult. It's definitely like a major limitation to us being able to move forward. And we've been going through these different cycles of trying to correct these asset locations and correct the GIS attribution. We have like 3 or 4 different like really significant projects going on to try to improve that, so that like the data that we have in these databases is accurate, and we can rely on it to build out these automations and really get the most out of the technology that we're implementing. Just to give you a few examples, is we're working with NERA right now to be able to do some predictive outage modeling on our distribution system. That uses a LiDAR-based digital twin. So going out and capturing LiDAR data of our distribution right-of-ways, pulling them into NERA, classifying those LiDAR point clouds. We can extract, those GIS coordinates, what components are on those poles, and we can, use that to update our databases so we have, a more consistent data model, right? We worked with a company called We Do IT to do some satellite correction data on our GIS system. That happens kind of on a cycle, right? So I think SPS is going through it right now. So there's a bunch of different efforts going on to try to improve that. And we have the ability to do it with drones too. So every time we go out and do a drone inspection, we're getting a RTK corrected asset location, right? And trying to figure out how are we going to coordinate all these different sources of truth to be able to produce the most accurate and reliable data model that everybody at Xcel Energy can leverage, right? I mean, it's not just the engineers, who need access to that data. The linemen need to be able to navigate the poles. The veg management team needs to be able to understand what's happening around the assets. The wildfire team needs to understand, what the area around the asset looks like to be able to do fuels assessments. So there's just so much that's happening and so many people that are relying on this data that's coming in that like it has to be better. It just has to. We just have to do a better job of accurately representing what's out in the field and like what the current state of the asset is. And if you look up the definition of surveying, like that's exactly what that means, right? So that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to coordinate all this different data collection and be able to produce the most accurate data model.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I mean, Adam could probably talk to it a lot, right? As you talk about vegetation management, veg encroachment, all of those types of things of clearing right of ways, like having accurate information makes it that much easier, right? Because I'm assuming, Adam, from your days back in clearing right of ways, you probably didn't have complex LiDAR data telling you exactly what to trim and how much to trim it. You just went out there and cleared the line and made sure things weren't broken.
Yeah, and a lot of our patrols were snow machines or ATVs or just boots on the ground. Like it was drop you off at a concession road, head due west, and we'll pick you up the other side. And if you found a tree that was a critical vegetation encroachment for NERC compliance, we would just cut it out right then and there and continue on. But we there was use of helicopters. LiDAR was not something that we really talked about in depth at that point. But again, it was just more of a visual, right? Visual line of sight of that asset. And then we would get a piece of paper, like a lot of the stuff I did when I was on a truck with storm response or just vegetation management. You wrote stuff down on a little sticky note, right? You put it on the dash of the truck, hope the windows were up and it's not blowing out down the road, right? I've seen that a lot in storm response, where you write down the information, whether it's from a transformer or the pole ID number, whatever GPS coordinate you can get. You go back into the command center, and then the piece of paper's gone. Right? It fell on the floor, got packed up in the garbage, and it's like that was good use of data. Now we're just sending people back out to identify that location again. Yeah, a lot of time wasted really when you're patrolling things that you're sitting there and you're wondering. And when I started, we removed trees on transmission corridors and we cut them up into manageable pieces of wood and piled all the brush. I remember sitting there and I looked at my senior journeyman. I said, "What are we doing?" Like, well, we're doing this for the customer. I looked and I said, "Where is our customer?" Like the line is secure, the asset is protected, that vegetation's on the ground. I look both directions. I don't see anything but woodlot. Like, why are we spending hours doing this, right? So you look at that back in, that was as close as like 2014. That's how we managed the corridor. And now we're talking about yeah, using technology to be proactive in this whole measure, and then just sending individuals to the specific spots where we need that work completed. So it's a massive transformation here in Canada. What I'm hoping is that with the changes that happen in November on the Beyond Visual Line of Sight, we're going to see some of these things that are going on in the US come up here, especially when we get talking about docks and mobile units and setting these things up in critical locations where you can. And I like Zach, I picked up on a couple key words here because I've been struggling in Canada as to like how do I present this to a client? And one is like your flight coordinators, right? I was thinking it's more like how do I communicate to someone where you can sit in a room in a control center, multiple monitors, multiple aircrafts, flight missions established, and you go. So I like the other one too. Centralized remote command center is another good one that I'm gonna have as a takeaway, because I think if we can speak the same language that you're talking on the south to the south of us up here, then it's just going to build up momentum, because a lot of the utilities here are communicating with the likes of PG&E, Florida Light and Power. I'm trying to get the whole initiative that Excel is doing up here as well, because those bigger enterprise companies are maybe a little further along, but what you guys are doing is pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been you talk about storm response, right? And that's a I think, a very complex operating environment, right? And I think these situational awareness tools just become incredibly important. When you have contractors and full-time employees, and you have all this work that's being done out on the assets, and you got people climbing the poles, that have been turned off. You got the control center coordinating with the linemen out in the field, right, for these PSPSs or storm response situations. And it's kind of like a market that's drastically underserved, at least with the different situational awareness like tools that the utility has access to. One of the applications that we used in the military, some of I'm sure you guys are familiar with ATAC, Android Tactical Assault Kit. That type of tool like completely changed the way that unconventional warfare is carried out overseas. I mean, like the amount of information that you can compile and track and relay in a mobile-based application like that has completely transformed the way that special operations handles the battle space. And it's I think the thing that we really liked about it in the military was how it was open source. You could create your own plugins, right? We had a plugin for ATAC that was called ATSK, and it was like a little tool that you could use to be able to overlay like dirt landing zone dimensions on the area where you're interested in, and you could build it out. It would have all the specifications for like the Air Force regulations for being able to land a C-17 in that spot, right? And you could collect all that data while you're out in the field. We could Bluetooth laser rangefinders to the ATAC and be able to shoot obstacles that are in the area, so we could collect how high these trees were or how high these fences were or whatever, and be able to package all of that up into something that could be handed off to a pilot. So in the middle of the night, under NVGs, they could land the UH-60s in the back on this dirt landing strip in the middle of nowhere and set up a mission support site to do all kinds of things, right? So and like that's really like what needs to be implemented out in the field for like these storm response situations with the utilities, right? It's like you need a way to be able to connect all of these different players together and get them operating off of the same model, right? And we have all kinds of different field applications at the utility, like FieldSmart, IQGO. We like create work orders, and the linemen will navigate to structures to be able to do repairs. They keep track of their inspections that they do out in the field through these different applications, and but they all are like designed to do one thing, right? Not to connect every single layer of people that are cooperating in this event, this emergent reactive event that's occurring, right? And so I think the flight mission management piece is like a really, really great way to connect all those different levels of people together into the same like scenario or emergent situation that you're dealing with, right? And a really good example is that you have a lineman that goes out in the field to do some vehicle patrols, and he gets to an area where maybe he can't access, right? Like, because it's just too steep, or he would have to walk and it would just take too long to be able to send a drone, go collect that imagery, bring it back, serve that data up to somebody that's remotely sighted. Maybe it's a different lineman, so he can facilitate the inspection and say, yeah, that line segment's clear, move on to the next area. Or let's say it's our senior vice president of distribution operations that wants to understand what's going on, and he can watch the live telemetry data, move around and understand like the state of the operation as it stands, and being able to connect all of that and serve it up in a way is something that I think is really missing from the industry. And I think it's more of a limitation and constraint on just how the utility operates, and like we kind of need to change the way that we look at those types of situations and how we deal with those different operations, just because it's not really what we're used to, right? It's something that's relatively new, as like our infrastructure's aged, and the severe weather is starting to really affect the state of our assets. But it's a really, really strong use case for data collection and these different types of applications.
I do. You articulated the military thing. I have to say it's pretty badass. If you're talking about using technology to do that, and then you go back to like the whole storm response with linemen and foresters and stuff. Like I remember being there where it's like grab a chainsaw, grab a rope, grab a throw ball, and you're gonna walk. It's like, well, how far do we go? We're like, we don't know. Back in the day, we used to
Keep
throw the
keep
switch in.
walking.
You threw the switch in, you looked up, right? You saw where that actually glow was when the switch went back in. And you're like, okay, I could be gone for 10 spans. I could be gone for 2 spans. You really don't know. And early on in my career, I was with with one of our instructors, and we went out in the wintertime, and it was cold, and he broke through a little creek, right? And myself and another apprentice, I think we only had about 2 months on, we started laughing, right? And just laughing. It's like, it's freezing cold, northern Ontario, and his boots are full of water, right? But at that time, we were only 2 months in, so we had no idea that we'd be doing this over and over and over again, and ultimately be the one with the wet boot and apprentice behind us, right? And your boot fills up with ice cold water. You yell at me like, "Can you just stop? Like, it's not funny, right?" But you remember years to do. But so, yeah, it's definitely a neat use case on where this has gone. But it also takes away from the stories, right? So.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique approach. Like you have a central base of all of your grid operations, right? And you guys will get the pun in that, and no one else will. Yeah, that's what you're creating, right? Like you're bringing all of that information together. You're allowing yourselves to make very quick and rapid decisions based on that, and coordinate all of these different moving pieces in the field, right? I think what you've started down in Texas shows what can be, but the opportunity obviously goes beyond that, to your point with PSPS and wildfire restoration and all of these pieces. Like that becomes even more critical, right? And like the real time feed of information back to those people that are making decisions is that much more important. So yeah, it's definitely a cool use case. So talking a little bit about Texas, how do you guys, you guys have docks, you're deploying them. How are you deploying them, and what are you seeing as far as like remote operations? You talked earlier, you have one operator managing, 4 or 6 drones down in Texas. What does that look like? What is your throughput? Like, how are you seeing inspections be done down in Texas?
Yeah, so like the actual work that's being done is a combination of just electric distribution line design work and what we call overhead pole assessments as a part of our wildfire mitigation strategy. So it's essentially going out and collecting data of these electric distribution assets that are in the high wildfire danger areas, and then serving that imagery up to a qualified electrical worker to make a determination about how we can redesign this line, or what is the state of this asset, right? For the purpose of being able to perform capital work like cross arms, pole replacements, maybe even like changing out like every single cross arm on the line to from wood to fiberglass, right? So that's kind of what our electric distribution organization in Texas is doing with the data. That's a big part of their process down there and reducing wildfire risk and just maintaining the system. And so what we've done is we partner with the electric distribution organization down in SPS, and we are providing them access to drone technology through that centralized remote pilot operations center that we've created. And so the scope of work, I think, is roughly like 148,000 structures that they're trying to do in 2026. I think the vast majority of that is OPA, and then, some of that is the line design work that we talked about. And so with essentially 2 linemen and 1 remote-sighted pilot, we've been able to facilitate almost 60,000 electric distribution inspections this year with 4 drones. So, each lineman's vehicle has 2 DJI Dock 3s mounted in the back, connected with Starlink, and we're flying, basically Monday through Thursday with, 1 pilot managing all 4 of those drones simultaneously, and we're getting ready to add another lineman with another 2 docks to try to make that process a little bit more efficient and be able to get ahead so that we have a little bit more time to do the remediations. I think we've created over 8,000 work orders from those 60,000 inspections. So it's been a ton of work, really, really high output from a really small team. And it's absolutely incredible. It's completely changed the way that, how we feel about how we're going to manage our inspections going forward.
Yeah, less than 5 months, 60,000 inspections, 2 linemen, 4 drones, 1 pilot. Like, think of what that, like, Adam's already like, that's a lot.
Well, and I'm thinking too, like just not just looking at linemen, but also like summer students or co-op placements or anybody else that could be behind the wheel of that vehicle, right? As long as you give them a map and a path forward of where they need to get to, you're just moving 4 wheels to that location. Then you have the pilot in the background manning those missions and collecting the data. So it just opens up the doors drastically for the utility sector when it comes to managing people, and taking your valuable skill set and putting it in the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
not to mention you get the benefit of being able to document the state of the asset, whereas like before, everything was visual inspection. It was like, hey, I'm putting my name on this as like the qualified electrical worker, and you don't have to do that anymore. It's, we have the tools to be able to go out and capture what it actually looked like on that day. And so you have something defensible to present and say like, hey, look, like this is what the asset looked like. This is how often we've looked at it, right? And now you have like a very, very good starting point for if there's ever like an ignition or an investigation. You can go back and you can really rely on, the inspection. Whereas before, there wasn't a lot you could do, right? Because these guys they're going out and they're looking at it and they're like, yeah, it's good to go, right? And so I think you just have a much more comprehensive view of the asset, and then you get to take something back with you that's really defensible. And I think that's really also improved like the state of our inspection programs, and giving us the confidence to be able to make decisions and make good decisions about how we manage our assets.
Absolutely. No more post-it notes getting thrown in the trash on the dashboard, Adam.
And no more taking a hammer out and hitting the bottom of the pole to see if there's any wood rot there. It's those days I think are slowly gonna be gone in the wind, right?
In the wind,
In the
absolutely.
wind. Yeah.
Yeah, if only we could figure out how to do wind turbine inspections, huh?
No, let's forget that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's awesome.
too many
So
pictures of blades.
we we talked about enabling technology. We talked about DJI. We talked about what XL is doing today. What as far as obviously you guys are now deploying. Like we talked about, there's 33 drones and solar, drone in the boxes to be specific from DJI. You have a bunch of drone in the box units for distribution and transmission that you're scaling. You obviously operate some other aircraft as well. Where are some of your partners? And I'm saying this because I'm in the wonderful offices and back warehouse of Vertex Unmanned. But where do you get your drones? How do you connect with this technology and really deploy it in the field? Besides, myself, give myself some credit in this too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's, a lot of folks that we're looking at working with. Just to be clear, like the vision at Excel Energy is to, create a hardware agnostic, remote pilot operations center that can serve the entire enterprise in across all asset environments, right? So, wind, solar, transmission, distribution, gas, right? Like we plan on, leveraging that centralized remote pilot operations center everywhere. And all of those business unit needs are different, right? And like how you facilitate those inspections require different sensors, different aircraft. On the transmission side, we're evaluating long range UAVs, different types of drone in a box systems, different aircraft that just have the ability to stay up in the air for a long time, right? So we're looking at like the Sci-Fly, they're kind of a newcomer to the industry, but they're really really amazing product, and they broke the Guinness Book of World Record for longest sustained flight by a multi-rotor aircraft. I think that's like a type of product that's really going to serve the utility industry well. It's providing a net new capability, whereas I feel like a lot of hardware manufacturers are just trying to fill the void that's been created by like the FCC covered list with DJI. And we're by no means like exclusively going to use DJI, but as you push the boundaries of this technology, you got to be able to trust your hardware, right? And that's why we've kind of stayed the course. Is when you're flying 6 different drone in a boxes, from thousands of miles away, and they're moving and facilitating inspections in different areas that are constantly changing. Like you have to be able to trust your equipment, right? And I think that's something that the American drone manufacturers aren't doing super well right now. But they're making progress, and they're doing good work, and we're looking forward to being able to integrate those types of platforms into our system. We've been working with Vertex Unmanned to do a lot of different things. One of the benefits of working with you guys is you just have you work with so many other folks doing different things, and being able to really leverage your guys' knowledge around the hardware, its capabilities, what's going to work, what's going to not work, right? So that having that relationship with a reseller, I think, is really important. And just understanding like what's possible in theory, right, versus like what's actually going to work when you go out into the field and try to execute, right? And I feel like like that, those are the types of partnerships that are really key to try to do these things that where there's not a lot of data, there's not a lot of like it hasn't really been proven. When you're really pushing the boundaries of the technology, you need to be working with people that understand how this stuff works. And you guys have been a really great partner for us, and we definitely wouldn't be where we're at without you guys really helping us figure this out along the way. So not just with distribution, but with with everything, right? With wind, I mean, you guys have just been a really great partner, and that's why we've developed such a great relationship over the years.
Like I was in the middle of saying how humble Jared is for not taking the the,
Come on,
the
I gotta take the
recognition for
opportunity a little
doing this,
bit.
right? As soon as he put that plug in there, I thought, come on, really? Like you
Uh,
just said
on
that so like so relaxed too. Like every conversation we have
oh,
is, well, if Jared's not involved, then
yeah.
I'm out.
Hey,
So
I mean,
that's
it is what it is.
I don't know if you're red in the
I
face now or if you changed your lens. I'm not sure what's going on here,
A
but
little bit of red in the face, a little bit of
every
the
time, every
my wife's
time.
my wife suggested the Paloma, so there might be a little bit of that going on, a little tequila. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Also, so I had the opportunity earlier this week to go to AUVSI for like a whole day. I mean, not literally. I was there for a day or less than a day. But I saw that David from SciFly, our good friend, posted that they are coming out with some dock stuff in the near future as well. So I think that's exciting as we talk about dock integrations. I know you mentioned a little bit, but we've had the opportunity to get other docks out on site. We've had side by side comparisons with other manufacturers, but certainly excited about what SciFly is coming out with, and what anyone else is coming out with for that matter, right? I think that's the constant, kind of goal of what we're doing is like we'll try anything, we'll investigate, we'll look at it, we'll see what we can automate, and we'll try to repeat those workflows and those scalability tests from anything, whether it be DJI or others. And we found that DJI to be the best, but others are certainly welcome in that space as well, as you say. So
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's really exciting is, you're seeing a lot of development in the space. There's definitely a major push for it coming from Washington, right? And just like improving our capabilities. And yeah, it's been really cool to see just people get a better understanding of the different problems that the utilities are facing and coming up with some creative solutions to be able to solve those problems with hardware and software. And we're to a place right now where, like I would never have imagined, we would be doing something like this and, building a remote pilot operations center. And, I can, now with the different software applications and all these different aircraft that we're, planning on integrating into the system, it's like, wow, like we're actually going to be more of like air traffic controllers than drone operators. I mean, like that's really where at least I see the industry headed with these different remote pilot operation centers and, different folks trying to build them out. Actually did a little bit of air traffic control during my time in the military. And like, there's just so many parallels, and just with how you manage all the different drones, the telemetry data, maintaining that situational awareness picture, facilitating that automation, it is so much like controlling air traffic in a tower. And just like how you communicate and, how you interact with the aircraft. There's just a lot of similarities there. So that's really kind of shaping the vision that I have for the Remote Pilot Operations Center for Excel. There's all kinds of super cool things that I think that we could do. I know, in the ATC tower, those of you that like aren't super familiar with just like air traffic control operations, there's 3 positions in the tower. There's the local controller, the ground controller, and flight data, right? So, the local controller is typically like managing all the airplanes that are in the airspace, that are in the air. The ground controller is obviously managing the aircraft that are on the ground. And then flight data is kind of like the coordinator, that helps out both. So like you're tracking, clearances that, get delivered, you're tracking, up times for aircraft that departed, you helping out like managing flight progress strips. And, I can see those roles kind of forming inside of our remote pilot operations center as we plan out these different automated flight routines for, solar and distribution simultaneously, and just like making sure that, the aircraft are all operating in the way that they should. Like that's kind of how we're interacting. And it's actually really, really incredible to see that taking form. And, I like, there's a really, really strong chance that, in 5 years from now, we're going to have, 10 or 15 people, that are a part of our UAS program, Remote Pilot Operations Center at Excel, managing thousands of automated flights across all 8 states, which is just going to be absolutely incredible.
absolutely, yeah. I think one more thing I just thought of as you said that too is, so you've done a lot of work, and I've got to be a part of some of those conversations as well. But like, what are you seeing as far as like flights completed since you kind of took the reins, right? So you've been in the role for almost 2 years now. But like from what you saw before you took the reins to what you've grown the program to, what are you seeing in like percentage wise or number of flights, the growth happening?
Oh man, yeah, it's exponential. It's absolutely, like, the numbers are staggering.
You
Historically,
can say it. You can say bananas. It's absolutely bananas. If you want to say it, Zach, go for it.
yeah, it
We're on a
is.
banana kick right now.
It is bananas. It is the it's just incredible. We historically the UAS program has kind of tracked its enablement KPI as like a UAS mission, and so what that means is essentially like a day's worth of flying per aircraft per pilot. right? So like, it's basically like, hey, like, and we primarily set it up that way because, we were a hub and spoke model. We were training business unit pilots. They would go out and, they didn't want to have to, like if they were going to do like 8 flights, in a boiler to do an inspection, they didn't want to have to like log every single flight, right? And it just kind of gets tedious to manage the individual flights. But it's like, hey, like we're going to go fly a boiler today, so it's gonna be like between 5 and 8 flights, right? So we're just going to manage that as a mission, right? So like that's been our metric that we've been kind of keeping track of since the beginning of the program. You know, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but on average, we're doing about 300 to 330 missions a year for like, that's the business unit pilots. That's the internal UAS program at Excel. This year, I just checked the numbers today. We just crossed 305 missions for the year, and it's May 15th. So, we just surpassed what we did in the entire year in 2024, which is incredible. And that's because of, the automated flight routines and, the fact that we can facilitate and support so many more inspections and missions and flights, across the enterprise. It's huge, right? So we've like really broken through, and we're seeing a ton of growth. I think we're forecasting around 280 missions just for distribution this year. We're forecasting like 630 missions for solar this year. It's gonna be bananas.
It's gonna be bananas. And just to be clear, too, that's like so far what they're adding isn't adding more pilots. It's adding automation and it's adding hardware, which is, I think, just the really cool piece, right? To see that exponential growth by just adding hardware, putting the right tools in place, putting the right automation, and having that leadership that Zach brings to the table. So, bravo! It's fun. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I always come back to, with the automation is we've effectively reduced our, our electric distribution inspection cost by 5x, right? So, if you can do that, the question that everybody in distribution should be asking themselves is, what do we do with all this extra money, right? And the answer is you go do more inspections, right? You go look at more of the system, and you further reduce the risk of operating these assets, especially in the wildfire tier areas, right? And that's what we're seeing. And I think when we originally started out on the distribution inspection program, it was like, they were like, it'd be really cool if we could do 8,000 inspections before the end of the year, which was like in November of last year, right? So we knocked that out in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they're like, wow, like that went really well. So like, we should probably do like 100,000 in 2026. We're like, okay, like that, cool. Let's do it, right? And then, just recently they added a new lineman, they added 2 more docks, and they're like, yeah, now we're going to do 148,000, and like they just consistently keep adding to the scope, and there's a reason for that, and it's just because it's been highly efficient, highly effective, and we haven't really had to throw additional bodies at the problem like we traditionally have had to do with third-party vendors in the past. So I would definitely expect a lot of consolidation and internalization, a lot of this data collection, which is obviously really great for not only my organization but Xcel Energy ratepayers, because ultimately they're the ones that are footing the bill for these different programs, and it's about time that they see a return on their investment. So the work that we're doing is absolutely incredible, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I think this is an incredible opportunity. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, I think that we're at the hour mark, just over an hour mark. So we'll wrap it for today. But Zach, if they want to, if folks want to reach out to you, I know there's some of your peers in the industry or others. Best way to get to you is LinkedIn, I assume. Any other parting thoughts you have there?
Yeah, no, LinkedIn's a great way to get a hold of me. I'm like a member of the Edison Electric Institute, so their message boards and forums are something that we actively participate in. And if the people that I know, just ask. I'd love to have a conversation and help move the industry forward. I think there's a I know the utility industry is really, really hard to, stand up new programs, especially, with drones. I mean, it's just a very polarizing thing. And so, however I can help folks, break through and be able to replicate this, I would love to help. So yeah, just reach out to me. And yeah, LinkedIn's a great place, a great way to do that.
Absolutely. Well, super appreciate the time, Zach. It's always great to chat. Adam as well. You look like you have more gray hair than I saw you last, but that's okay.
Wait until you see
Age,
me in 2 more weeks. So at least I'm not drinking
rapid,
right now. I'll look a little
rapid
different.
aging.
I know that's what you do to me.
All
Yeah.
right, folks. Well, appreciate it. Until next time.
Alrighty, we'll see you.